star. A fallen star. Careful, Captain. You cite the devil's word to me. A warrior from the stars. You come to challenge me, Sky Warrior?
Linx! Same ugly...
Identical, yes. The same, no. I am Star. Field Major Star, as you would address me.
I'll make these connections, and this, to me, looks like a teleport pod.
Oh. We have an intruder!
How did he get in? Intruder window? Bye-bye.
Hello, and welcome back to the History of series. Today we'll be adding to the archive the Sontarans, the warrior race bred for war and only war. So, let's begin. The original inhabitants of Sontar were known as the Kaveetch, and like we humans are considered Earthlings, they considered themselves as Sontarans. At an unknown point in history, the Kaveetch went to war with a race known as the Rutan host, eventually reaching a stalemate. This is when a scientist, Meredith Roach, proposed the creation of a clone army, one that could beat back the Rutans, turning the tide of the war. Within weeks, these clones were fighting on the front lines, and had turned the war to the Kaveetch's favour. However, the newly cloned Sontarans turned on their creators, seeing them as inferior and possessing dangerous knowledge of Sontaran physiology. Even the existence of the Kaveetch was removed from the Sontarans' official history. According to some Sontarans, before the Rutan War they were split into clans. These clans would fight amongst themselves until the survivors joined forces and set their aggression on aliens instead. The clone Sontarans were engaged in the Rutan War for millennia, except during the Millennium War, where they briefly joined forces with many other races to combat the Constructors of Destiny. During the dying days of the 51st Starfall campaign, the Sontarans suffered heavy losses against the Rutans. Sontaran scientists eventually created the world engine weapon Warsong to change the tides in their favour. The Sontarans were unable to deploy the weapon, and a brave warrior, yep, that's his title, named Kaagh, escaped the Rutans, and while mortally wounded, took the Warsong to Earth, where it remained dormant for centuries. In Earth's prehistory, a Sontaran went to Egypt, where he was worshipped as a god. Eventually, the Egyptians learned of his plan to destroy Earth, and buried him alive inside of a pyramid. In 102 AD, the Sontarans were one of many races to join the Alliance. They came to Stonehenge and helped imprison the 11th Doctor inside the Pandorica, thinking they were saving the universe in the process. During the 13th century, a Sontaran scout named Linx was forced to perform an emergency landing in England after being attacked by Rutan fighters. He claimed the entire Earth and its moons and satellites for the Sontaran Empire. He proceeded to form an alliance with a local warlord known as Irongron and transported scientists from the 20th century into the past using osmic projection, hypnotizing them to work on repairing his ship. He was killed when his repaired ship started taking off, blowing him up and Irongron's castle, confusing archaeologists for centuries. Linx was remembered with honour by his fellow Sontarans, who viewed him as a great commander. The rest of the Sontaran Empire sought to fulfill his claim over the Earth. In 1522, another Sontaran scout ship crash-landed on Earth, this time in China. Because of the crash, their hyperspace transmitter was damaged, and they required a replacement crystal in order to call for reinforcements and take over the Earth. Like Linx before them, they formed a partnership with two humans, the abbot Hisyong and Yue, who knew them as Bronze Men. Using their hypnotic technology, the scout enhanced the monks' fighting abilities. When the Emperor of China learnt of this, he asked for a demonstration. This was all part of a plan by the scout to kill the Chinese Emperor, as he possessed the required quartz crystal to power the transmitter, and so ordered the monks to kill the Emperor. However, this plan was thwarted when the Fourth Doctor intervened, having K9 record the trigger words and break the spell, but not before one of the monks called Chang went berserk, killing the scout. In 1605, a group of Sontarans came to search for a crashed Rutan ship buried under the Houses of Parliament that contained two doomsday weapons, capable of wiping out an entire species. Both the Sontarans and the Rutans competed to obtain the weapons, but the 11th Doctor got there first, modifying one to wipe out the Sontarans, and the other to wipe out the Rutans. He gave each race one weapon, but didn't tell them which was which, forcing a stalemate between the two and rendering them useless. In 1609, the Sontarans and Rutans participated in the summit of military powers throughout the Mutter Spiral in the Armageddon Convention on Laputa, a floating island near Venice. After being resurrected in the aftermath of the Battle of Demon's Run, Commander Strax worked with Madame Vastra and Jenny Flint on Paternoster Row in 1888 London. In 1892, after the 11th Doctor was brought out of his retirement, Strax defended Captain Latimer's house from Snowmen controlled by the Great Intelligence. He tried and failed to save the life of Clara Oswin Oswald, something that affected him somewhat. In 1893, Strax worked with the Doctor, Clara Oswald, and the Paternoster Gang to stop Mr. Sweet and Winifred Gilliflower's plans to wipe out humanity except for their chosen few. Along the way, he befriended an urchin named Thomas and saved his friends by shooting Gilliflower. At some point after, he assisted the newly regenerated 12th Doctor in stopping the half-faced man. At some point during his time in Victorian England, Strax became separated from Vastra and Jenny. He assisted Jago and Lightfoot on a case. A Sontaran soldier named Brax visited Earth in 1916 and witnessed the Battle of the Somme. He was captured by British soldiers and imprisoned for 80 years, during which he created weapons of mass destruction for humanity, hoping that they'd destroy each other. In the 20th century, it was believed that a Sontaran scout ship crashed in Tunguska. Some of this wreckage was obtained by UNIT and kept within the vault. In 1941, a small retinue of the 8th Battle Fleet arrived in the Sahara Desert after having discovered the world engine the Warsong had begun to activate after being lost for millennia. They hid among the Tuareg tribe so that the Rutans were not aware of their presence. After the Rutan, Heinz Bruckner, had claimed the world engine with a device that controlled its movements, the 12th Doctor tricked Kaagh Brox into believing he would seize the Warsong for the Sontarans. As a result, Kaagh gave the Doctor an osmic projector to send the control device through time, stopping Bruckner's plans. However, instead of allowing the Sontarans to defeat the Rutans with the Warsong, the Doctor destroyed it with his sonic screwdriver. In 1945, the Sontarans were one of 23 races that came to Dusseldorf in search of the Persuasion machine. At some point during the 20th century, Edgar Nelson Stanley met with Sontarans. He believed they were the silliest race in the galaxy. In 1965, 300 Sontarans were killed by Captain Golkutha when he and his squad hijacked a Sontaran timeship. In the 1980s, Group Marshal Stike claimed that the war with the Rutans was on the contrary to going badly. The 9th Sontaran battle group attempted to gain unlimited access to time travel through Kart's and Reimer's experiments. This failed when Shasin betrayed Stike and Major Val, and the 6th Doctor sabotaged the Kar's Reimer module. At the same point in time, the Sontarans were involved in a battle with the Rutans in the Medallion Cluster. In the 2000s, Major Kreg of the 9th Sontaran Battle Brigade was sent to survey Earth for the Empire. He was intercepted by Torchwood and forcibly resettled at Mumbles Bay Caravan Park. He eventually came to appreciate his life there, after clashing with the park's owner Mr. Higgins and summoning Rutan mercenaries for a battle, and then took over running of the park. In 2009, the Sontarans were losing the war against the Rutans. To counter this, the 10th Sontaran Battle Fleet, led by General Stahl, planned to convert the Earth into a cloning world, and carried them out with the help of Luke Ratigan, a neurotic genius. The Sontarans used a form of hypnosis on the workers of the ATMOS factory, forcing them to start shipping out devices that contained gases poisonous to humans, contained inside the plates attached to the sat-navs that they sold. When the 10th Doctor attempted to meddle, the Sontarans activated all the devices already deployed in cars, releasing the poison gas and choking people nearby. The gas was burnt away by the Doctor's use of an atmospheric converter, and Ratigan, having been betrayed, sacrificed himself by using the converter to destroy the fleet. Following this attempt, Commander Kaagh was left as the last survivor of the 10th Sontaran battle fleet after he crashed to the Earth. He used Professor Nichols Skinner to bring satellites crashing into Earth's nuclear power plants. He wanted to take Sarah Jane Smith back to Sontar for the Doctor's crime, and for her knowledge of the Sontarans. The plan was stopped when Chrissy Jackson disabled Kaagh with her high-heeled shoe, but he came round and was forced back to Sontar in his pod. Following this failure, Kaagh became a mercenary for the Bane. He met Mrs. Wormhood while looking for the remains of Horath, and they agreed to work together. After finding the mind of Horath, he followed Wormwood to Earth, where they took the Tunguska scroll from Sarah Jane and kidnapped Luke Smith. The alliance started to break down when Mrs. Wormhood sided with Luke over Kaagh, ending when she betrayed and disabled him. Seeing that he had lost, he dragged Wormwood into the wormhole containing the Horath. In 2009, one Sontaran was captured by the Krulius and stored in a datapod. The Krulius later used his digital bioconverter to upload the Sontaran's biodata onto the internet. There it was found by Mr. Smith, Ronnie Chandra, and Clyde Langer, who sent the Sontaran back to his home planet. Another Sontaran was kept at Dollar Starbase. When the Judoon caught the Krulius, all of his captured aliens were set free. However, the Krulius had managed to take clone cell samples of his former captured aliens with him, which allowed him to grow perfect copies of these aliens. Around 2010, one Sontaran named Jask was on Earth and was chased by Martha Jones and Mickey Smith. He managed to get away and tried to kill them with a sniper rifle, but he was knocked out by the 10th Doctor. In 2011, at least one Sontaran weapon was part of a shipment stolen by CIA Special Operations Division when it was removed from the hub. In the 2010s, Commander Mercs of the 8th Sontaran battle fleet crash-landed on Earth and fell into the possession of the Auctioneers. They supplied him to John Torrance for use on his cloning experiments, with Torrance attempting to create his own Sontaran clones for human militaries. Marshal Scar led the 8th Fleet to Earth to discover Mercs, reluctantly collaborating with unit forces led by Kate Stewart and Colonel Shindy. Their combined forces were able to take over Torrance's facility and destroy the cloning project, rescuing Mercs, after which the Sontarans withdrew. Also during this time, a Sontaran was the resident of the hidden Trap Street in London under the protection of Mayor Me. As with the rest of the inhabitants, it appeared cloaked in human form via lurkworms. A war wheel crashed on Earth where its wreckage was found by Mr. Kamen, who salvaged a host of technology as well as one survivor, Group Marshal Skral, whom he had forced into servitude as a mercenary. Ultimately, Sam Bishop, by appealing to Skrall's sense of honour, convinced him to turn against his master, killing Mr. Kamen at the cost of his own life. In the 21st century, 2 Sontarans were in Istanbul. The 9th Doctor fought them in a sword fight, and had his life saved from one of them by some sort of spy called Sally Sparrow. The Sontarans grew interested in the flux, with psychic surveyor Kaagh assessing its impact. He reported back to Commander Ritzkor that the cataclysm was imminent and forecast conflict that will dwarf all that has come before, to the commander's excitement. Ritzkor then ordered an attack against 2021 Earth. They invaded just before the shield of Lupari ships sealed to protect the planet from the flux, occupying Liverpool and constructing a fleet of time ships to invade the Earth throughout history. A pilot temporal invasion was conducted in the Crimean War, led by Skak. The Crimea Sontarans came into conflict with British forces and encountered the 13th Doctor, who sabotaged their supplies to force them to retreat. As their ships began to lift off, a British commander used gunpowder to detonate them. Back in the 21st century, the Doctor's companion Dan Lewis infiltrated the fleet and was rescued from the Sontarans by his assigned Lupar, Carvanista. He rammed one of the Sontaran time ships into the rest of the fleet, creating a temporal shockwave which removed the Sontarans from Earth. In revenge for their defeat, the Sontarans invaded Earth again later in the Flux Crisis, with the aid of the Grand Serpent, attacking the Lupari ships shielding the planet and breaking into the Williamson tunnels. They wiped out the Lupari and occupied Earth, though they were resisted by Kate Stewart's resistance. Exploiting Earth's psychics to identify the origin point of the next Flux event, the Sontarans planned to take advantage of it by luring the Dalek War Fleet and the Cybermen forces there under the pretext of forming an alliance, planning to protect themselves using the Lupari ships. Their plan was sabotaged by the Doctor, who changed the formation of the Lupari ships to expose the Sontaran fleet to the Flux as well, destroying it and the rest of the fleets. Around the 25th century, the Sontarans clashed with the forces of the Earth Empire during the siege of the Hexian Gates. In 2570, the Sontarans were engaged in activities in the Magellanic Clouds. At some point during the 26th century, the Sontarans sent in Commander Steg to conquer Jakar in order to create a buffer around Sontar. Though he had no difficulty with the humans, the Jakari, led by the 7th Doctor, were able to fight back effectively. The surviving Sontarans scuttled their bases and abandoned the planet. Sometime later, an expedition was made to go on to Centaurian and take advantage of the wormhole connecting it and Ruta 3 to kill the Rutan Queen. Though the Sontarans tried to keep this information classified, a Rutan spy known as Kaagh was able to learn that the information had leaked out and tried to return it to the Rutans. Commander Steg was sent in to redeem himself and kill Kaagh. He was able to track it to the space yacht Tiger Moth, where it had hidden in the ship. During the course of his investigations, his soldiers were whittled down by Kaagh and the human crew. Eventually, Kaagh was killed, and all the Sontarans were believed to be killed. In reality, Kaagh was able to clone himself before his death, and Steg was able to pull through and survive. The second Kaagh was able to escape to Centaurian, followed by the 7th Doctor, his companions, and the survivors from the Tiger Moth. Commander Steg was able to follow them with a war wheel, and forced the Doctor to open the wormhole to Ruta 3. The war wheel was sent through, but the Doctor was able to reverse the polarity of the wormhole, meaning the war wheel would never get to Ruta 3. When Steg tried to kill the Doctor in revenge, a fight began, leading to the death of Kaagh and the Sontaran forces. Also at some point during the 26th century, the Sontarans and Rutans took their war to the colony Chelsea 426. The 4th Sontaran Intelligence Division, led by General Cade, were given the mission of hunting down Rutans that were at the time taking over human bodies. The 10th Doctor was present during the event, and while he did not side with either party, he did stop the Rutans, after which the Sontarans left. However, there was evidence that the Sontaran Division's trouble with the Rutans was not fully over after the ship left the colony. During either the 25th or 26th century, the Rutans destroyed the Sontaran homeworld, Sontar, with photonic bombs, though some escaped with the Sontaran race pool. At the same time, the Sontarans encountered the Pureblood Sontarans. Due to the intervention of the 7th Doctor, the cloned and Pureblood Sontarans decided to pool their resources, and Marshal Stave promised to remove the Sontarans' memory of the humans from the race pool. A group of Sontarans landed on the planet ERM 4997 in the year 3076, where they encountered the 7th Doctor and Melanie Bush. In 4037, 11-year-old Commander Strax was demoted to nurse for his failure, tending to the humans in the Battle of Zarustra. He was summoned by the 11th Doctor to Demon's Run circa the 52nd century. Strax ended up dying in the Battle of Demon's Run at the hand of the Order of the Headless Monks. Madame Vastra and Jenny Flint brought him back to life, however. According to one account, in the year 10,06074, the Sontaran Empire had been reduced to radioactive remains. However, according to another account, many thousand years after the 20th century, at a time when the Earth had been abandoned for 10,000 years, the Sontarans were separated from many human worlds, like Galsec, throughout the Mutter Spiral by a buffer zone. The Grand Strategic Council planned to invade the galaxy, but they had to abandon that plan when a scout, Field Major Steyer, was killed while trying to assess the strengths and weaknesses of humans. After this, the 4th Doctor bluffed, telling the Sontarans that their battle plans had been captured, so they would have to call off their invasion. Ultimately, the Sontarans became extinct by the twilight years of the universe. The Sontaran mining ship Betrothal of Sontar was sent to Serac as a form of demotion. Colonel Snaith, the pureblood Sontaran, believed that the Thanatos was located on Serac, but his attempts to find it were unsuccessful, and his crew became restless and insubordinate. When the 10th Doctor arrived, Snaith forced him to find the Thanatos, but when Snaith tried to control it, the Thanatos decided that the Sontarans were stagnant, and Sontar needed to be destroyed. Though Larrock showed that there was still hope for the Sontarans, Snaith was killed when the Enoch shoved him outside during a silver fire. The Carpalian's witch's favourite hunt was when she hunted a Sontaran. Since her pheromonal lure was ineffective, she waited in his ship for 6 weeks until she stabbed him in the prolic vent when he was about to recharge. One of the fiercest Sontarans, Katsu, fought and was defeated by the Levenaxis. In order to become more powerful, he went to Elaf 777 in search of a mythical superweapon. He was eventually able to track it down to Omega 666, where he opened it, revealing it to be the Omega Green Plague, which killed him. The Treemass Master once tried to kill the Grak with a group of Sontarans, even making the Grak joust with one. Scrant was sent on a 7-year mission to conquer Bractalis. He joined forces with Demimom. He was defeated by Demimom's daughter, Alarine, and her lover, Kinvor's forces. The Sontarans sent a force to investigate the planet Goth for weaponry. The Sontarans attempted to invade an unnamed planet, but were stopped by Croton. Both Sontarans and Rutans were trapped in the edifice. They continued to fight even there. A group of Sontarans chased Riversong across the country after she remarked that they were on a hen night. The 11th Doctor encountered a group of Sontarans while visiting Florinel 9, and was forced to escape them by surfing on its lava. An unnamed planet, defined as a worthless rock by the Sontarans, was an outpost of the Sontaran-Rutan War. The 5th Doctor tried to advise the local commander, Strock, a strategy to avoid the useless loss of his soldiers, but the commander still died in vain as they charged the Rutans. Following the establishment of the new Dalek paradigm, the Daleks built a series of space fortresses along the border of Sontaran space, amongst other species. Sontarans were among the species susceptible to the nanocloud that created Dalek puppets. Sontarans were among the many species drawn to Trenzalore by the asking of the first question, but they were locked out of the planet by the Payville mainframe force field. 2 Sontarans attempted to bypass the force field during the siege of Trenzalore by putting on an invisibility cloak, but the Doctor used a sonic screwdriver to make the Sontarans visible to the Payville mainframe, which they were then destroyed by. Conforming to protocol, the mainframe apologised for their deaths and selected an appropriate afterlife. Later, the Daleks attacked the mainframe and broke through the force field. The Sontarans followed them to the surface and either died in the fighting or possibly retreated. The Sontarans were notable customers of the information regarding the Doctor held by the Infrararium. When the 11th Doctor discovered the Sontarans, as well as the Daleks and the Cybermen, had been purchasing this information, he infiltrated the Infrararium and memory-proofed their database using methods he learned from the Silence. The information sold was thus instantly forgotten. The Master set himself up as a messiah on a Sontaran colony planet. A century or two after he left, the 17th veteran cohort came to the planet with the purpose of wiping out the Sontarans infected by the Master. The suicide specialist Sontaran destroyed the bearded Sontarans along with the entire planet. One Sontaran attended Bon Jax's birthday party on Marathea. Sometime prior to Sarah Kingdom's time period, the Sontarans began attacking individual human star systems, forcing the Space Security Service to organise an evacuation of millions of humans. An SSS squad was sent to attack a Sontaran facility in the Soulgrave asteroid belt, as the fleet needed to go through the pass there. An undercover Sontaran, Gage, used Rutan technology to infiltrate the squad, which encountered the First Doctor, Stephen Taylor, and Sarah Kingdom. Commander Slight led his forces against the squad, killing most of the SSS agents and capturing Stephen. Slight tortured Stephen for information, including his recent encounters with the Daleks. Gage led the survivors into an ambush, and Slight held them prisoner, seeking to access the Doctor's TARDIS. When Gage began to waver from his orders whilst interrogating the Doctor and Stephen, Slight killed him and took over. As the native Neil began to rise up against Sontarans, the Doctor convinced Slight to hold fire on the evacuation fleet, by playing on his potential shame, allowing them to pass. Though the asteroid belt was liberated, the Doctor and Sarah predicted the Sontarans would return one day. An entire Sontaran assassination squad was wiped out by Amanda Steele and her pest control team. Their heads were removed and mounted as trophies. The Sontarans came to Luachamar to fight the various races that were warring there, having been upset at being left out. The 13th Doctor once hid from an army of Sontarans in a cupboard. A Sontaran army was caught in the paradox formed by the Theo-Temporal link formed by Rose Tyler and Empress Rose, after briefly appearing during the Blitz, where they pledged themselves to Depower's ambitions. After helping him overthrow the Empress, the Sontarans boarded the space fleet, ready to wage more war, before the two Roses touched, causing the Blinovitch limitation effect that banished the Sontarans. The Secret Lives of Monsters presented an image of Sontarans fighting cyber-style Cybermen. In Gallifrey's past, the Sontarans joined Rassilon's alliance of races in the Great Inferno, a war with the Hyperions. After the Hyperions were defeated, the Alliance then went on to purge the universe of other threats to universal harmony, one of those threats being Count Diff of the Cybok Imperium. The Sontarans were also a part of the force which went to war against Morbius. The Sontarans, in concert with the Vardans, invaded Gallifrey, until they were beaten back by Lord President, the Fourth Doctor. This invasion, nonetheless, brought forth the Cloister Wars. The Sontaran attack revealed to the rest of N-Space that the Matrix existed. The Sontarans were part of the Supremos Alliance in the war against Morbius. The Sontarans were in negotiation with the Time Lords in the Order of the Black Sun for uranium on Desralt. When the Time Lords seemed to favour the Order of the Black Sun, the Sontaran ambassador Brillox used a psi snare to turn one of the special executive escorts, Millennium, into an assassin. After Millennium killed the Black Sun Elder, Brillox believed that with Gallifrey and the Black Sun at war, he'd be able to secure the uranium rights for the Sontarans. However, when War Dog discovered the psi snare on Millennium, he returned it to Brillox, wiping his mind. A group of Sontarans were sent to an alternate death zone on Gallifrey, and fought against the Fifth Doctor and a group of Daleks. During the War in Heaven, the 79th Sontaran Assault Corps invaded the 11th-day Empire on the behest to houses Tracolix and Lolita. However, Lolita later betrayed them, consuming them with the rest of the Empire. Despite failed attempts to join in the conflict, the Sontarans were not allowed to fight in the last Great Time War. General Stahl understood it to be the greatest war of all time. After the Time War ended, the Sontarans fought other races for control of time. In an alternate timeline created by the Black Guardian, where the First Doctor never left Gallifrey and became Lord President, the Sontarans were one of many villains that invaded Earth and fought over the planet with other races against the Silurians and Sea Devils. This timeline was negated when the Seventh Doctor retrieved the key to time. In an altered state of reality, the Doctor convened a peace conference between Sontarans and Rutans on Gallifrey, with the Sontaran delegation being led by General Sontar personally. After the conference broke down, the Doctor kidnapped Sontar and the Rutan delegate in his TARDIS to show them the possible outcome of their war, only to find the future universe destroyed by the effect, which horrified both delegates. The Doctor left them locked in his TARDIS whilst he went to resolve the effect crisis, and only remembered to actually release them after defeating Omega. He discovered in his absence Sontar and the Rutan had actually talked and negotiated a peace, as the TARDIS's temporal grace had stopped them from killing each other. In an alternate timeline known as the Cyberverse, which started with a change in history in 1927, the Sontarans were one of several major powers in the universe who were conquered by the Cybermen by 1951. In an alternate timeline where the Daleks were peaceful, the Sontarans remained a dangerous force in the universe alongside the Cybermen. They won the Battle of the Karak's Rift. Following a psychic conference call with Madame Vastra, Jenny Flint, River Song and Clara Oswald, Strax was taken by the Whispermen to an alternate Trenzalore where the Doctor died in battle. On Trenzalore, Strax was able to resurrect a dead Jenny, but couldn't defeat the Whispermen and was nearly killed. When the Great Intelligence altered the Doctor's timeline after accessing a wound in time at the Doctor's grave, Strax turned evil, and Madame Vastra was forced to vaporize him. After Clara repaired the timeline, however, Strax was returned back to his old self and apologized. In an alternate timeline, where the Cybermen used Time Lord resources to conquer all of history, by the 24th century, the Sontaran Empire had been completely eradicated, save for Sontar and the last great Sontaran warfleet. Under the orders of the Sontaran Prime, Commander Sturg and a patrol of Sontarans captured the 10th Doctor, Gabby Gonzalez, and Cindy Wu at Cosmomart to lead the Sontarans in a final battle on Sontar to stop the Cybermen taking control of the Sontaran cloning factories. Although the Cybermen massacred the Sontarans, despite the efforts of the 10th Doctor, the 12th Doctor allied with the betrayed Rassilon at the end of the universe to use the Eye of Harmony on Gallifrey to erase this alternate timeline from history, restoring the Sontaran Empire along with the rest of the original timeline. In a pocket universe created around Donna Noble by the Time Beetle, where the 10th Doctor died before the 10th Sontaran Battlefleet's 2009 invasion of Earth, Torchwood 3 took his place in destroying the flagship and stopping the spread of the ATMOS gas. Gwen Cooper and Yanto Jones were killed when saving Earth, and the immortal Jack Harkness was taken back to Sontar. And that is the story of the Sontarans, by far one of the longest histories that isn't the Daleks or the Cybermen, and also one of the saddest. The Kaveetch were a simple race until the Rutan War, a war that wiped them from their own history books and caused more than likely trillions of deaths. But anyway guys, thanks for watching. This video is one that I've only completed recently, but started in October 2021. I think I hinted that it was coming soon in a few videos back then, but evidently I was lying. But it's here now, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like and subscribe down below, as it really helps out the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.